Hello everybody. I am very privileged to be here today with Tegan Devar, the Managing Director of PeopleSmart, a people and organizational development company based in Durban, KwaZulu-Natal. Tegan, wonderful to be with you again this morning.
Thank you, Justin, and welcome to everybody watching.
Let's jump right in. You recently published a fascinating article on News 24 and in City Press, and it has the most incredibly enticing title, fascinating. It's entitled, "Sometimes You Just Can't Buy the Cow." Hmm. What do you mean by this?
Thank you, Justin. This actually came out of a conversation I was having with my colleagues at work. And we were talking about how, especially with loved ones, it's so easy to give in and help somebody else. Um, and and we then said, well, sometimes you can't buy the cow, making the analogy so that when you go home for a function, and often you have to buy a cow for that function, that often it's just one person doing that, and it's left up to them. And sometimes it's an emergency, sometimes it's a funeral, whatever the case is, and it's just left to that one individual to do that. So it talks to boundaries, and it talks to how with our loved ones, it is really difficult sometimes to put in those boundaries, and that comes at the expense of many things. And I think we all have that metaphorical cow or literal cow in some instances. We all have that thing. And sometimes, often it's money, but sometimes it can be your time, your resources, that you give to those you love and care about. And you can see in that moment, when they're struggling, and you give in and suffer then in silence. And so it is about boundaries and how we value ourselves and how others see us and how we allow others to treat us. And that if we are unable to put in those boundaries with love and care and to say, this is what I can do, or to have the tough conversations that how can we work together to achieve this, then it really comes at the expense of our own health, and our own families and the things that matter to us. And then we are unable to care and to give and to look after those things that matter to us.
Hmm. As you talk, I know that so many people listening will be relating to this because you quote some really quite scary statistics in your article. There's a Finscope South Africa consumer survey that you quote, which says that between 10 and 12 million adults in South Africa are over indebted. So they can't actually meet their current debt obligations. That is a huge percentage of the population of our country. And you're in this game, you're out in the field working in your role as an industrial psychologist. There's two things that I think will be interesting. Firstly, what is the cause of this massive level of indebtedness, and is it tied to this concept of buying the cow? And then, perhaps even more importantly, what are the consequences that you're seeing of people being so over indebted?
Sure. Great question, Justin. And you're 100% right. It is a scary statistic, and so many people are struggling. And I think in part, yes, it's a response to our economy and people just being unable to live within their means. But what I'm finding in space is this, that when you dig deeper, we often find that people struggle to have these really tough conversations with people that they love. And then they take on that financial burden and are often the only ones that are taking on that financial burden. And then it is expected from others
Mm,
as well for that one person to take on that financial burden. And so, and that for me is a challenge. I think we, especially in collectivist cultures, and I think many South Africans come from collectivist cultures. And what I mean by that is our identity is tied to and is in relation to others, tied to others, in relation to others. It is not just me by myself. And that's a very powerful thing. I think many people on our continent wouldn't be able to survive without that collectivist strength. So we all, for example, in a household, pool resources or contribute so that the whole is strong. And that is beautiful. Where it becomes challenging is when that responsibility is dumped onto one person only. And
yeah.
then we lose the beauty of that.
Mm.
where we all have to be doing something and collectively, for example, pooling resources to buy the cow, for example, or saying, I can't buy the cow this time around, but what can you do? And that means having honest, real conversations with those we love. And what I find in collectivist cultures is that we do not necessarily learn that we can have those conversations. So if you grow up in a collectivist home, the chances are, and this again is a beautiful thing, we have deep respect for our elders, but there's no space to challenge anything. And so you go out into the world not really learning that skill of how to challenge. And that can be problematic. It means we have to do a little bit of undoing and learning about my voice matters and that I can say no and that I can challenge things and I can do it with love and I can do it with care. So an
Mm. Yeah.
example I use, and I reference it in the article, is there was this man who, for many months, was contributing to building his family home. And he was giving money to his mom and his dad and his family at home for months. And then one day he decides to rock up and, have a look at progress on the house. And not a single brick was laid. There was no materials, and his family still expected him to continue contributing. And for many people, that might sound absolutely ridiculous, but I can tell you in collectivist cultures, this is not a foreign thing. It's a very real thing. If you think about that this another example, a young student who's the first graduate in their family, their entire family pooled resources so that they could go to university. But then there's this immense expectation
Yeah.
that they have to then support that entire family, you
Mm.
know. And so I think there's conversations that we can have with love and care about how do we make sure that everybody is healthy and well and everybody contributes to that whole. Um, and so, in situations where I think about siblings sitting down together and saying, okay, if you're unable to do this, what can you do? Can
Yeah.
you, it might not be monetary as well. It might be other things, I can make meals. I can take mom to the hospital. These are the things I can do. I can be present for my parents. I can do those things. So I'm not talking solely in monetary terms, but I do think in our country that is a huge contributor to what we're seeing. And so often I see these financial awareness courses as well, and they're talking about budgeting and savings and investments. And yes, that's important, but we're not talking about the boundary conversation. How do I sit with my mom? And I said, Mom, I can't buy the kitchen cupboards this month, but can we wait till month end? Or can I chat to the family and see how we can do this? And having that very real and honest conversation. And then families in response saying, hey, we need to all do something together so that the whole is stronger. We all contribute so that everybody is stronger, not one person is left feeling depleted. Yeah, and I think there's another dynamic as well where those who do it might feel, yeah, hey, I'm doing this, I'm providing, maybe it's expected. So we play into that until
Yeah.
something happens, until, we get into debt,
Right.
until, we are struggling with our mental health. And that's what we are encountering as well. We're seeing the health impact of that. Tons of people just in debt, who are gambling to try and make up the money, and falling into greater debt, who are struggling with mental health, depression, anxiety, trauma, just so scared of having that conversation and not knowing how to and how people will respond to that.
Mhm.
Those are the consequences, and those are very real consequences. If we talk about organizations, that's what you're seeing as the presenting problem. Often when we explore that and go deeper, we find that people just haven't had that conversation with their
Right.
partner, the honest conversation with their partner, with their kids, with their families about what they can and cannot do, and what are the things that their family members can also do to help and support that individual. And when we do, we often see people are like, sure, I just didn't know. Let's
Yeah.
find ways to deal with this. It's often done with
Yeah.
a lot of grace and love.
It just reminds me of that conversation I think we were having recently where we talked about um, every big issue in interpersonal relationships started with a small issue that had no conversation attached to it. That if we
Yeah.
don't have the conversation there and then, when it arises, it's going to turn into a big issue. You talk about the impact of buying the cow on the person who is buying the cow. We've talked about them getting into high levels of debt, or we're seeing mental health, which of course then becomes physical health issues. And we know that this can often end up in suicide attempts or suicide itself, when people are literally completely depleted. So we can see the impact on the buyer. But I'm also interested to hear your views on the impact on the person who's constantly doing the receiving, especially amongst perhaps younger people. Um, there must be, to some extent, an erosion of esteem, dignity, even capability if all you're doing is receiving. Perhaps you can talk a little bit into that side of it.
Absolutely. It's a great question, Justin. And we can even talk about it in psychological terms, the kind of role of the rescuer and the impact of others when
Yeah.
one individual just constantly comes in to save the day. What does it do to other people? And first and foremost, it disempowers. So, people then get into a space of learned helplessness. Like we talk about other family members, maybe let's use an example, that depend on one sibling to support them, right? And it then becomes expected. Why should I even try? My sibling will do it. I can just ask them, So
Yeah.
it's this learned helplessness, this feeling of disempowerment, but also not being given the chance. You rob those individuals of the chance to feel that they too can contribute, which is a very important part of life and living, that we have to feel that we can contribute to a greater whole. And it can be little things. Your children doing chores around the house, they're contributing to something bigger and become independent as a result. And I can do it. And it grows confidence. And then they want to try something else. So it's really about allowing people the space to take power of an agency for their lives and also see their contribution to it and to hold one another accountable that I am also a part of this. And I'm part of making the whole stronger and I can do my little bit. So I think when we rescue, we rob people of that opportunity to learn, to grow, to feel empowered and to find their own power, to take ownership of things. Um, and that can be devastating because then you're leaving people in the sense of helplessness, and then they might be very resistant to try.
Yeah. Obviously in our country, because with high levels of unemployment, with high levels of indebtedness, we're almost perpetuating this cycle of rescuing and then disempowering, rescuing, disempowering, which of course leaves these patterns of intergenerational poverty, unemployment, whatever it is, with all of the impacts that has for individuals and families and society. So, yeah, what I'm getting from this, and certainly from your piece, it's a very powerful conversation that we're not necessarily having, and it has impacts on the whole of society. It's not just on the individual or the family. That spreads into the community and into the society. So let's end here, if we can, by just saying two or three strategies from your experience, simple things that we can go away and perhaps implement immediately.
Absolutely. Thanks, Justin. Um, I think the first and foremost, we have to just be honest with ourselves if we're not coping. And that means really looking at how you're feeling. If the day-to-day things are becoming difficult, if you're looking at your bank balance and you're saying, sure, I'm just not making it, then that is a real indicator to one, seek support, but it's about an honest conversation with self that, hey, I need to have this conversation. And then the
Yeah,
next step is actually having the conversation with those significant others,
yeah,
with love and care. And I think this is where it becomes difficult. So everybody knows they have to be having the conversation, but often they struggle with the how of having that conversation. And just to say that how is really important. It doesn't mean a straight no. It doesn't mean we have to be cruel about it. It just means I can have an honest conversation with people I love with love and care. And to
yeah,
say, hey, family, hey, partner, I need to speak to you about this. I haven't spoken to you about it. You
yeah,
need to know this. And by doing that, we are showing love not only to those we care about, but also to ourselves.
Yeah.
Just being honest to ourselves. And it can be done with love and care. And people are often surprised by what partners say. I see lots of examples in my workshops where one partner will, in a relationship will say, my partner just doesn't know how I spend money. They don't know. And I'm actually scared to tell them.
Yeah.
And it's going on a journey of how can you start having that conversation. And then the other partner often sees, I just didn't realize. So I was just expecting all these things. I didn't realize there are better ways that we can pool resources together. We can get the kids involved. Um, and if it's done with love and care, often it is received with love and care.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that's really important. And then thirdly, seeking professional support if you need to.
Mhm.
So if it's a debt counselor, you need to go and speak to somebody. If it's a therapist, a counselor, a very good friend, somebody who might be really good with boundary setting and you want to learn from them. Um, I think it's really important to seek that support. And I think many organizations in terms of their wellness programs, wellness services often have that in place. And if your organization does, please make use of it because those services are often accessible to employees. If you're not in that space or your organization doesn't provide that, there are amazing national resources, the South African Depression and Anxiety organization, SADC, Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, gambling hotline. There's amazing resources out there. Use that, seek support to help you on that journey. So it really is about self-awareness and then having that courageous conversation with those you love. And overcoming that barrier that can often feel very scary for many people. And just know if you do it from a space of love, it is often received in the same way.
Beautiful, beautiful. And of course, you are in this space, you are coaching people, you are running health and wellness sessions, very involved, I know, in the mental health space in organizations. So, for anyone listening to this who is struggling in this particular area, please do reach out to Tegan and to the People Smart team. And thank you for your time and wisdom. I think this is a really important piece. I would encourage people to go online and to find this at News 24. Yeah, and let's keep this conversation going.
Thank you, Justin, and thank you to everyone who has been listening.